Hey guys, it's Mr. Hollywood and welcome back to another episode of Cards 101. I know we're at kind of a weird angle today, but we kind of need to be because today's topic is all about how to look at your cards before sending them in for grading. We're going to talk about the conditions that these companies look for or have in their grading rooms. We're going to talk about obviously the four main categories, which is going to be centering, surface, edges, as well as corners, so that you guys have the best chance of scoring a PSA 10, a BGS 10, CGC, whatever, Beckett, whatever you guys are trying, whatever company you guys are trying to use. We want to make sure you have the best shot of scoring a 10. So the first thing we are going to review is our basic categories. Now, the video might be a little close here. Can I zoom out? Okay, well, I might not be able to zoom out, but we can see here our four main categories: centering, edges, corners, and surface. On Beckett slabs, it's kind of nice because you can order subgrades and you kind of get them on the slab. You do pay extra for that. However, PSA is doing grading notes now, so you can kind of find out what went wrong with your card. But those are your four categories that they're going to be looking at. Let's also look, I want to first, before we get into those four categories, I want to talk about the grading conditions. Now, I can't exactly replicate them right now because I need the lights on so that you guys can see me. But first things first, I've been very fortunate to have been inside of the grading room at, I'm not gonna say which of these companies that I've been inside the grading room at, but I was very fortunate to be able to spend some time inside of the actual grading room, and I can tell you that the conditions inside of those rooms are dark. The lights are off. There are no lights on the ceiling. The majority of the room is is essentially black. These graders use one light that's kind of suspended above them, and it is not white in color. It is actually a yellowish in color. So you're gonna wanna get a light that has the ability to maybe not just be white, but also has the ability to be yellow. So for me, I, for example, use one of these lights up here, which has, I'll link the light in the video description so that you know which one I'm using. But it basically allows me to use white light, standard light, and like a cool light, a white light, and then a warm light, which is the setting I'm on right now. This is warm. So that's the conditions that they're in. It's a dark room. It's a yellow light that's positioned directly above them. They then take your card out of the one touch out of the card saver and out of the penny sleeve, and it takes them about 5 to 7 seconds to decide on a grade for your card. Usually for the bigger cards, they'll scrutinize them a little bit longer, but for most of your cards, I'm telling you, they're taking 5 seconds. They're not taking any of these centering, measuring devices to it. It's not happening. They process way too many cards to have time to do that. But let's take a look at a few different examples here on what you might submit. These are just totally random. These are just totally random cards that we picked up, well, that we had out of Optic. But first, why don't we start with corners? Let's start with centering. Centering is kind of the first thing that everyone looks for. So centering, what do we mean by centering? You want to make sure that your card, on all of the borders here, we can tell on this card that it has a clear white border. Now, some cards do not have a clear border. Something like this does not have a clear border. But for the purposes of this, we have a clear border. You want to be 50-50 spaced on the left side and the right side, the top and the bottom. Yes, the top and the bottom do make a difference. that counts for centering. It's not just left to right. So we can tell here that this one looks pretty good. If you want to use a centering tool, you can. Just keep in mind that PSA actually has a leniency on the centering. So it can be slightly off. I mean, like slightly off. I think they want to say like 60-40, you can still get a 10. So for the most part, I don't use a centering tool. I just eyeball it. That's just me. Eyeballing seems to just be easier for me than using a centering tool. They can be a little confusing, honestly. So that's centering on the front. Left, right, top, bottom. And then on the back, you have the same thing. Left, right, top, bottom. So centering for this card, in my opinion, looks very good. And so here's another reason, by the way, why we use the bright light above and no light coming from the ceiling, although I do have lights on in the office right now, is because you can see there's a big reflection off of this card right now, right? You want that reflection because that reflection is how you're gonna pick up a lot of imperfections in your card. So what imperfections, you may ask? If I were to turn this light off, so I'm gonna turn off my grading light, okay? So that, I know I'm a little dark right now, but I turn the grading light off and we go ahead and bring a card onto the screen, right? Here's a DeAndre Swift. Now, some of you maybe have noticed the imperfections with this already, but we're gonna talk about surface now. And if I turn this grading light on, if it would turn on, there we go. You can now see all these reflections in the card, right? It helps me distinguish things. Let's talk about surface. When you get dinged for surface, what they mean is there's a problem in the surface of the card, all right? So we see two problems on this one, and these are man-made. I created these problems. We're gonna start with this one right here. You can see right there, we've got kind of a indent in the surface of the card, okay? I made that indent with the butt end of this pen earlier. So it's hard to pick that up unless you are under a bright light, like this grading light that we're using, and it's dark elsewhere around you. Now, what is another problem with this card? We have this small imperfection right here. Now, what is that? That I made with a tiny little screw, and so that is indented into the card. That is what we're talking about in terms of surface damage. So those are both types of surface damage. What is another type of surface damage? We'll go back to the first card we had. Another type of surface damage is called a print line. And we can see right here, you can see that in the reflection, there is a print line there. Now sometimes print lines or surface issues can be removed. How do we do that? Well, we take a microfiber cloth, just like this one right here, and we just try to see if that surface ding comes out. You can also use a little bit of card spray. We get ours from Kurt's Card Care, of course. So you can take a little bit of card spray and get it onto the card just like that if you so choose. Now remember, the chromium cards, you can do this. Paper cards you cannot because they're too porous and they will absorb this spray. But we'll go ahead and wipe down on top of that print line and see if it comes out. And if it does not come out, as is the case here, so we just sprayed it down, wiped it down, so you can see right there that our print line is still there. So what does that mean? That means that that is actual damage to the surface that you probably cannot get out without maybe polishing it. And polishing it, as we know, PSA is not okay with you polishing your cards. That is considered surface damage. That would take your card down from a 10 to say a 9, okay? These are more intense versions of surface damage. An indent like this, I actually had a card that went in that got, I believe it got an 8, and I was very Surprised, and I had no idea why. It was because I had a little pin prick like that. Obviously, I didn't do that intentionally like I did on this one, but that took it to being automatically a PSA 8. Something like this would be even more severe, so I would imagine even less than an 8, significantly less than an 8. So that is what we're talking about in terms of surface. That's what you're looking for surface damage. The next thing we want to talk about is edges. So what are you looking for on edges? Edges mean the edges of the card. So here, up on the top, so top, bottom, and left and right. So this right here, you can see we have, right here, a little nick in the edge, okay? That's considered edge damage. That is edges, okay? So this would also take your card down significantly, okay? I think a lot of people don't really understand how easy it is to get a PSA 9 or a PSA 8. I mean, your card really has to be in mint condition to get a 10. Personally, I don't submit anything unless I have gone through all 4 of these categories and I cannot find a single thing. If I find even like the smallest imperfection, the majority of the time, I just don't send it in. Unless I'm absolutely okay with it getting a 9, I just don't send it in. But I'd say out of every 100 cards that I submit, I would say I get less than 3 that are graded lower than a PSA 8. Like that's how much of a stickler I am with it. I really make sure that they are in good condition. But this is what we're talking about in terms of an edge. If you have a nick in the edge or even an indent, say I take my fingernail and I press it into the edge here, it doesn't have to be, like you can see, I didn't affect this part of it per se, and it might be hard to see, but we clearly have right there, we clearly have a ding in the edge, right? So that would be considered an edge damage, okay? So that's what edges are. So you're looking along all 4 perimeter edges on the front, on the back, and then as well as on the side like this to determine if you're gonna have edge damage. And this is partially why the super thick cards are so hard to grade, because they have thick edges. That's a lot more space for you to have something to go wrong. What do we have left? Corners, of course, corners. Corners is one of the biggest ones. Let's take this one. This is not a real autograph. I signed these for something we're gonna talk about in a second. But corners are gonna be top right, top left, bottom right, obviously. Front and back. Now they do put more weighting on the front. It's more important everything is more important on the front, but they will still ding you on the back. So what do they mean by corners? They basically don't want any whitening on the corners. So if I kind of do this to the bottom corner, you can see we have whitening now on this bottom corner right here. That would be a no-no. You do not want to submit cards that have that. Unless you have vintage cards. Of course, vintage are on a whole nother scale. They're so old that they should have some damage, and it's fine sometimes, in some cases, to get a 1 in a vintage card. But in a modern card, do not submit when you have corners like this. You can also have corners that are not, let me grab something. I'm gonna grab this screw right here and try to kind of get into this corner a little bit. Okay, perfect. So I'm just gonna split it a little bit. Hold on. All right, so we've jacked up this corner quite a bit, but let's imagine that it's just like this, okay? There is no whitening on this corner, right? But what is there? There is, obviously, you can see that there's some separation between the front and the back. So it's like raised up a little bit, right? So this is also considered a damaged corner. It doesn't have to be white like this one down here. It can also just be peeled or turned up ever so slightly, and that is also considered corner damage. Now you want to also look at the back of your cards to see if you have corner damage on the backs. Again, it doesn't have to be discolored or white. It can even just be like, if I take, let's see, what's a good corner? This is still a good corner, this bottom right corner. If I take this bottom right corner and I just like press it down a little bit, we're just gonna do this. We're just gonna fold it. So here, obviously no color is missing, but it doesn't come to a point, right? It's rounded, right? If it doesn't come to a point and it has any sort of roundness whatsoever, that is another thing you wanna look for, and that is considered a damaged corner as well. The last thing that we wanna talk about is grading autographs. Now, grading autographs is something that a lot of people do, but I'm not sure necessarily a lot of people understand what they are looking for. You're basically looking for consistent pen pressure and color for the most part. So you can see these are not authentic autographs, but we can see here that on this Oswald Peraza Junk Wax card, you can see that on this part of the O, you can see how the ink, the pen line is lighter here than it is over here, as well as all throughout here. We can also see on the finish of the signature, because of the speed with which it went across, you can see there that it's not as clear right through here. This is lighter as well. Any autographs you see that are like this, where they might have gone too fast and it's a little bit light in some places, but dark in other places, or that the autograph like goes off the card, see how it goes off the card? So part of the autograph is theoretically missing, even though it's kind of a useless part of it. This is not an autograph that you should be grading. So this is not gonna get a PSA 10 autograph grade. It's not. When you look at a card like this, okay, this is Jose De Jesus. I have no idea what Jose De Jesus' signature looks like. I just wrote this here. But you can see that my pen is consistent the whole way through, okay? There's no areas that are necessarily lighter than the others. They're all dark. The entire autograph is on the card, right? The pressure, the pen pressure is consistent. This is an autograph that you would want to grade if you wanted to submit your card for an autograph grade. So that's basically the nuances between grading autographs. How do you know if your card is worth grading? I talked about this in an earlier video, talking about how to comp your cards. That's very important. If your autograph if your card is in a PSA 10 is worth, say, $50, and the cost to grade the card is $15, then it might be, and you think that your card has a very good shot at getting a 10, then I would say go ahead, submit the card for grading, take that risk. I typically don't take that risk for anything less than, say, like $50 to $75 in a PSA 10, unless I'm 100% sure it's gonna get a 10. But remember that comping your cards and being able to comp your cards is half the battle here. Half the battle is knowing what to grade and what not to grade. Now with the bigger cards, like something like this is an Aaron Judge RPA numbered out of 25 out of 2017 Topps Inception. This actually would be a pretty easy card to sell these days, considering he's probably gonna hit like 60 plus homers again. With a card like this, cards that are low numbered or very big, it doesn't necessarily matter what the numerical grade is per se. Of course, a 10 is gonna do way, way, way more than something that's just graded authentic. But in my opinion, if you don't think unless you're grading vintage, in terms of modern, if your card is grading less than a 9, in my opinion, or less than an 8, then it actually decreases the value of the card. So I prefer, if I think it's gonna get lower than a 9, if I think an 8 is the ceiling, then typically I will just grade and have it say authentic as opposed to having a numerical grade on it. I can show you what I mean real quick. So this is a very old slab. This is a vintage old slab, but here's a Duke Snider 1954 Topps autographed card. But you can see up here it's just authentic, because grading the card, I mean the card's in horrible condition, it would get a 1. And some people just prefer it to say authentic. You can do the same with modern cards. That's honestly what I would suggest for anything lower than like an 8, maybe an 8.5. If it's a superfractor, sure, I guess it really doesn't matter what the grade is. There's been a few superfractors that have been dropped and have like PSA 6s and stuff like that. So that's fine as well. But that's your basic rundown of what you're looking for when you are going to submit your cards to PSA. If you do decide you have a card that is going to pass all the checks, all your parameters, it has passed surface, it has passed edges, corners, and centering in your books, and you've taken your microfiber cloth and you have cleaned it and prepared it for grading, then you're just gonna slip it into a penny sleeve just like this, and you're gonna take your card saver and you're gonna slide it into your card saver just like that. And then bada bing, bada boom, your card is ready to go to PSA and get graded, hopefully a PSA 10. So that'll pretty much wrap it up. That'll do it. Quick video on how to analyze your card, how to look at it before you send it in for grading, and more importantly, the conditions in which you should be looking at your card. Remember, dark room, turn all your lights off. Get an LED light that is above your desk or table or whatever you're doing this on. Make sure it has a warm light feature. You want to use a warm light, not a cold light. I don't mean temperature in terms of like hot and cold. I mean like yellow versus white. You want the light to be a little bit yellower. That's just what they use. I don't know why. It's just, it is what it is. You want to then hold that card underneath that light to try and catch all the reflections so that you can see all of the surface damage that you possibly have. Surface is by far the thing that people miss the most, and I can tell you the reason they miss it is because they are not looking at their cards under the right lighting conditions before sending them in. So make sure that you have the correct lighting conditions when you're looking at cards before submitting them. That'll do it for me today here on Cards 101. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe down below. We really appreciate it. We like hearing from you guys as well. We try to respond to you whenever we get a comment. So until next time, we'll see you right back here at Hollywood Rips. Mr. Hollywood, out.